welcome everyone. We've got a couple of guests today, but I'll introduce. So I'm Trevor Young from Digital Citizen Group, and with my two co-hosts, we are Content Leaders Academy, and that's Andreas and Matt. So my just bit of kickoff really is to say that we just thought we'd have a crack at something like this, just getting people's input, quite rough and ready, but it's really around content marketing in Australia, the state thereof, and what are people finding out there, and just getting different opinions, because probably from where we sit, and we do a lot of research and talk to a lot of people, and there's a lot of stuff happening. I think everyone will concur. A lot of people are doing a lot of content. It's really fast moving and a lot's happening. But from a more strategic level, who is doing it really well across the board? From what I see, there's some of the bigger brands are doing some really interesting stuff, and there's a lot of smaller brands that are probably doing even more with less resources. So I think it's good to unpack it and just to see, because there's a lot of confusion out there, a lot of confusion. So one reason why we're banding together with Andreas, myself, and Matt. But I'll hand over to Andreas there in the green glasses, looking very debonair.
Okay, well, thank you, Trevor. So as Trevor said, we've started the Content Leaders Academy. It's basically to try and fill that gap around some, very kind of practical skills-based education, training, upskilling in content. And our first offering is a full-day masterclass where you're going to discover all the skills you need to lead your organization's content efforts. We're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end of the session. But if you want more information, head to www.contentleadersacademy.com and we'll talk a little bit more about the end. But I'm going to kick off by throwing it to my colleague, Matt. Matt, from where you're sitting, from your experience and the work you're doing at the moment, what do you see the state of the industry here in Australia, and who's kind of your, really great case study that you want to share with us?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think as an industry, we've made significant progress over the last 5 to 7 years when I think about where content marketing was and where it is now. But it's still a vertical. And if I look at that compared to, say, America, I'd say that America's 6 or 7 years ahead of us. So content marketing isn't really a thing per se anymore in America. It's just integrated in how they market and engage their customers. And I compare that to Australia, where we still haven't managed to operationalize this customer-led ecosystem that's powered by content. Although for me, the one, and it's a great question, ALVs, who does it well? HBF. They're internationally acclaimed content hub, direct advice for dads. I think it's one of the best in the business, and for a couple of reasons. Strategically, it's a smart play. There was nobody in that space that let them have a completely different conversation with dads in particular, who are often ignored from a health insurance perspective. But it's also really raw and authentic and quite brave. So they've had a piece of content that's always stuck with me that was from an alcoholic, talking about his journey being a new father and the challenges he had to overcome, being an alcoholic, and how he dealt with that, the impact on his family, what he did well, what he did badly as a parent. And this involved, forgetting about his kid because he was drunk and things like that. And it was so raw. And I thought it was really brave of HBF to do that. The thing that stuck with me was the last line. And it was, are you being the best dad you can be, or do you need help? And that, for me, sort of sums up what this whole site's about. So unequivocally, they're one of my favourite brands. And I think it's because they've combined this commercial savviness with purpose-led marketing in a really customer-centric way.
Yeah, good one.
What about yourself, Andreas? Who are you seeing out there that's doing some interesting things in Australia in terms of content?
Yeah, I would suggest really one of the most exciting things that I've seen is both from a content point of view and a product point of view is Up, the new bank, the joint venture between Bendigo Bank and a tech startup. They have set themselves a mission to create the world's first kind of mobile-only banking experience. Now, they're obviously developing a lot of technology, moving very, very quickly. They've only had a license through Bendigo Bank for about a year or so. But in reality, what's particularly interesting there is that they have developed a clear content strategy and approach, which is targeting just a very specific audience. It's obviously targeting customers that are Gen Z in particular, and probably the lower half of millennials. And obviously that's a very cluttered space. Everyone's going for that audience, but in reality, they have really identified a tone, a style, formats, and I guess a way of communicating with that group through their content, both on social media in particular. There's some great Instagram story stuff. They write some great content on their blog. They have some great video content as well, all very much geared toward that audience, and not at all talking about stuff that doesn't matter to them, really focusing on their area of expertise and really kind of finding that kind of, I guess, that meeting point between what they're authoritative and credible for and also what the audience is looking for. And I think that that's really key, especially in that space. They've really sort of doubled down on a handful of formats and a handful of channels and ways of speaking to that audience that really appeals to them, to the exclusion of others. And I think when you think about content strategy, you really have to think about how your decisions are going to affect the broader brand, and really making some conscious decisions to exclude certain activities and certain audiences so you can actually deliver an impact for a particular audience, which is a great lesson for all marketers here in Australia in particular. If they're thinking about sort of moving up that maturity curve, is understanding what audiences they can really connect with and impact through their content, and focusing only on those, and probably culling a few around the sides.
Yeah, they do it well. Their About Us video is quite unique as well.
Yes.
From my side, I'm not going to pick just one, but I won't talk too much about each one. I mean, I think that at the enterprise level, I've been watching Officeworks and seeing what they've been doing. They've got a podcast called Paper Cuts, which is quite cool. They have got a number of videos, and they look like they've thought it through in terms of the stages of people in their business and breaking down small business. MYOB have been doing that for years with their blog, and they're pretty good as well. They've got the runs on the board and a lot more mature, but they're continuing it up. And MYOB's competitor Xero is got a really. I like going in and seeing, not just blog anymore, but resources, and then you click the resources button and you just get all of this layered content, and that's when you see someone or a brand that's really starting to, as I said, layer it out and look at different audiences. Because obviously with someone like Xero, small business and businesses are part of their audience, but also bookkeepers are a massive audience, and to their influencers as well. So they've got lots of educational educational guides and stuff like that, as has Canva, which is a tech startup but a unicorn worth over $1 billion, and a lot of their content is really around the tutorials. So what I'm trying to say is there's not one size fits all, and it's great to see a real mix. I think a lot of the action is also happening at sort of the smaller to medium size end, and to that end it's great to see Carolyn Hyams from Firebrand Talent and Quint. But Firebrand Talent is one business I've been watching for quite some time, and great that they're also a supporting talent partner of Content Leaders Academy. But Carolyn, if you want to just sort of chip in here, you're at the coalface doing it day in, day out. You've been doing it for years. You've built a terrific online resource, a blog that's written by a lot of experts and specialists in the various relevant areas of digital and creative that you're involved in, that Firebrand's sort of appealing to, but also you guys contribute your own content as well, and you've got all the social channels lined up. Do you want to take us a bit through of what are you seeing at the moment? What are your challenges, and what's getting you excited in the content space?
Glad you asked me about challenges, because there's plenty. Thanks for the call out, Trevor. I really appreciate it. I think the biggest challenge is getting cut through. I really think that we're all suffering from having too much content, and getting attention is challenging. So I think the biggest opportunity, and I think probably we'd all agree, is that any content that's actually moving Video, animation, content that's valuable and educational. I'm very passionate about that area, has a far greater chance of getting eyeballs. So for us, it's what can we do with the resources we have to get attention. And I think that's another challenge. There's a lot of sort of small to medium-sized companies who may not have enough resources in-house to produce consistent content that's going to draw attention from a money staff point of view. So I think that's really challenging as well. And the last thing I would say is the attributing your content to ROI. I think measuring content performance is very tricky. Yes, measuring engagement is easy. But many analytics platforms work on a first or last click attribution. And as we know, when it comes to content, people are, taking this journey and it's not linear. They're going all over the place. And, what piece of content actually, what was the journey that attributed, your lead and your sale in the end? It's very tricky.
What do you look for at Firebrand?
Well, unfortunately, our web team use a last click attribution. And in all honesty, I don't believe that's the right thing to do. So we're just wanting to build trust and reputation in our brand and add value. Yeah. So that's key for us. We're not looking for the sale. It doesn't work like that in recruitment. We're providing a service and we want to provide value. So in the end, I think the most powerful thing is referrals. People have a great experience. They love what we do. They love the content that we produce, the events that we put on, the great salary guides, anything that's going to add value. And then they'll talk about us to others and recommend us. And that's the ultimate for us.
So being known, liked, trusted, top of mind, and being talked about.
Yep.
They're the things that we'll gauge. We'll start building the commerce side of things as well. Peter Gearin, thank you, Carolyn. Peter Gearin, I see you've dropped in here, mate. You've been interviewing. You run Brand Tales, which is an online magazine for content marketing, and you interview and you do a lot of profiles. Who are you seeing that's jumping out at you at the moment? What's your feeling of, given that you talk to a lot of people, where people are at the moment, where brands are at the moment with their content marketing?
I think a lot of people, Trevor, sort of have this mentality that sort of thought leadership needs to be the first and only reason they get into content in the first place. Yeah. It's to try to build this concept of, I am a really important person, or this is an important brand, and we're going to show you what we do, rather than actually thinking audience first. And I think ultimately that seems to be the biggest issue that people are now addressing. I think for a long time, it was something that was like we all jumped in there, got into the content area because we knew that this was what we had to do. But now there's a sense of actually, now we want it to actually have an effect, have an impact. And the way we do that is by actually thinking about audience first, about trying to think about the things that are happening in their world and how can we address that by producing content that's useful and relevant to them.
Yeah, Pete, I love that sentiment. And I think to build on that, for me, it's around how do you find the nexus between customer centricity or audience needs, commercial outcomes, and then what's the gap in the market or what's the competitor set doing. So you're right, it's not just thought leadership, but it's around how do we produce content in a really sophisticated but commercially driven way.
That's why I think, a lot of the examples that I would recommend, I did a story for Brand Tales at the end of 2017, which was the top 10 Australian examples. And I think we've mentioned just about all of them already, because they seem to be the ones that are constantly going around as the ones who are evolving their ideas to what their audience is, and they're developing content which is exactly for them. And I think that's been a really important part of the development of each of those brands, is by using content to develop their audience and to take them to the next level. I think it's really hard for brands trying to break in there with a very much a product sort of centricity to do that and to kind of get success. And I think it's actually that whole audience focus that actually changes the game for a lot of those brands, because they're able to see exactly what they need to do based on what their audience tells them.
And Pete, I think that's certainly a really important lesson, I think, for brands. Because actually what you're describing is really more of a publisher or a media company mentality, to think about your audience, what they want to know, what they need to know, how you can help them credibly. Maybe you can tell them some things that you think they should know, it's relevant to them. And that is a big kind of step change, I think, to your point, that instead of just talking about what we're doing and talking about our products or about our leadership, actually identifying that need or that want or that hook from the audience to give them something that they're going to find useful and they're going to find beneficial. And I think if you can serve the audience's need in the first instance, you're going to have a much better chance of actually getting people to engage with some of your other content, your more kind of, brand-centric, product-centric content down the track. And I think that's a maturity curve thing. I think that in Australia now, we're starting to see a lot of people, to your point, ask that question and begin to think about it that way. And that's good, because otherwise, if we don't do that, we can't evolve. We may as well get off the train at the next stop, because the reality is audiences are not really interested in your brand or product unless it's directly connected to their life, to their challenges, and to their needs.
And that's right, Andrés. And I think the other, thing to follow that on is that, because of that maturity that hasn't quite evolved yet, it also is about the skills you need to be able to produce that kind of work.
Yes.
It's not necessarily there right now, especially in-house, I don't think. I think a lot of people who have kind of gone down the path of creating a content team aren't necessarily employing or contracting the sort of skills they need to be able to do that really effectively. And I'm thinking that's probably what the next step is, to actually think as a publisher, to be able to think in terms of what sort of skills do we need to actually reach an audience rather than to sell stuff.
Yeah,
and
100%.
that is really tricky, I think, for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, Peter, I think that, the hybrid model is the one that I'm starting to see work really well, where you've got certain skill sets in-house and it's managed in-house, and you can do a number of things in-house, particularly maybe around the content for social, but then having a sort of a collective or a team of freelancers who like and trust. You work with them, you trust them to go out and do the job. So for all intents and purposes, they work for your business, but they, they're in and out, and you're using them as need be, because, just to scale up for a full content team, it costs some coin. Now, I often give the example of the Goulet Pen Company in America, and that's a team of, as in the company itself, 42 people. And they do probably the best content I've ever seen, certainly for their size. And they have 7 full-time. 7. Wow. That would put a lot of major corporations to shame. So, it's mindset. How important is it to your business? And for these guys, they're growing at a really fast clip, and it's very important. Social and content is the key driver of what they do. So they scale up accordingly in-house. And I can tell you what, it makes a big difference. But I'm also seeing other brands that are, they're controlling it really nicely in-house. They've got the strategy right, but they know when to go out. They probably haven't got a podcast producer in-house, but there's lots of good podcast producers out there. So they bring them in as part of the team. And I think that hybrid is probably the most cost-effective way of getting the best resources, but without breaking the bank per se.
Yeah.
Trevor, agree with that model completely, but I want to jump back to something Pete was talking about, which was the customer centricity piece, because we've actually got a bit of a unicorn on this call, which is Branka as well. So Branka's best known for leading Arlo and Co, and their own e-commerce platform, One Tiny Tribe, and she's done an incredible job. But what I find most interesting about her is that she actually combines marketing and psychology. And I was just really curious if you could explain how you do that for us, Branka, and then also what are some of the learnings from this really customer-centric perspective that you are able to sort of draw those insights from a psychology background?
Hi, guys. Yeah, look, I'm really glad that a few people have already mentioned that having sort of a content in-house team is quite pricey and it's expensive. And so with both One Tiny Tribe, which is my business, and Arlo and Co, is both online retailers who I sort of just recently left. But both of those companies have been built almost entirely on user-generated content, because, you know, starting out and sort of going from a one-person team of doing absolutely everything, not just marketing, but everything, to sort of building out a team that can do all these other things, you kind of, content kind of, it drives the business, but you also don't have the time to produce that stuff. So we spent a lot of time, especially in the beginning, and this was 2014, it was like the beautiful time of Instagram, when things were still chronological and the algorithm wasn't screwing you over and all of that. We sort of spent time building this community and reaching out to people in the community and sending out product and getting content in return for product. And that sort of had a snowball effect, because those people would then reshare the fact that they were being shared on, you know, these bigger accounts, and that kind of fed itself, and purely, you know, through social proof and through word of mouth. So that's kind of how we combined that. And so a lot of it was social, you know, social media content. But then we sort of started tapping into, okay, now we've got these communities that are quite engaged, so we'd reach out and sort of have conversations with them about what they need, and you know, as you say, really putting the customer first and going, well, what kind of stuff do you need? Like, we found out that when mums are putting together birthday parties, that, you know, they want it to look beautiful, but they also want the hacks. So we ended up putting together this blog post about how you just stick these two pieces of cake together and you layer it with a bit of cream, and you can make this beautiful cake. It went berserk. Like, it went out via email, then it got reshared. So that's really been the strategy for us in terms of trying to create content and manage content, you know, with such limited resources, but also tapping into those communities and kind of getting people to do that for us.
Just in terms of, and speaking about, you know, there's obviously the user-generated content, which a lot of brands, in particular other industries, travel and tourism. Andreas, you're coming from Tourism Australia, you're well aware of the power of user-generated content. But if I could patch in Carolyn again, I think I alluded to earlier about how they've built a very sizable blog or a content hub, and not only do they create content in-house, but they also partner with, and myself, I've been writing for their blog for probably about 4 years now, to create content. So they give them a platform. But Carolyn, if you just want to walk us through how you do that. I don't know whether it's called an influencer relations program or something, but it's, you know, it allows you to build something that's bigger than just firebrand talent, and, you know, giving a voice to other people, giving you a spread of content that's pretty top, it's very top notch, but also it flows into events. So firebrand talent do a number of events, and there's a crossover between people who speak and also who write. Carolyn, do you want to take us through just a bit about the thinking behind that and how that works for you? Because you've probably got it down to a fine art.
I have now, but I didn't when I started. So basically, we're a fairly small company, and being able to write all this great content internally would have been absolutely impossible. So we really wanted to have the best industry thought leaders, but it's got to be sort of a give and take thing. So so what I did is I approached industry thought leaders like yourself and many others and said, you know, would you like a platform to write some content? It's, you know, obviously you specialize in the areas we recruit for. So it has to be within the categories we recruit in. We approach an industry thought leader, would you guest blog for us? And we will promote the hell out of you. So we'll help you build your personal brand online. We just want really great content. And that has really helped our guest bloggers, our industry thought leaders, build their brand globally. And it has really helped us build a content hub that is of great value to our target audience. So it really has worked for both. And then obviously, if we're talking about industry thought leaders, we do hold our DigiTalks events, and I'll put it to the panel events. And who better to ask to come and keynote and on various topics within digital marketing, creative development, than our thought leaders who are actually blogging for us. So again, great brand building for them, amazing content for us, and the people who attend these free events are just getting great educational value. So it just works for everyone.
Yeah.
There's so many things I love about what you guys do, Caroline, but for me, it's really around, like, we all talk about integrating made, owned, earned channels, but it's also around combining physical and digital, which is what you have done so incredibly well, which then enables you to build a community, of people who want to engage. And I look at that, and what a lot of organisations do, I think they feel they have to produce all of the content themselves. They're not actually brave enough to go, we're not the subject matter expert, but let's build a platform and curate the best content so that people come to us. And I think you guys are well ahead of the curve in developing an approach that lets you scale an operation without having 20 writers on site.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And after all, who wants to actually hear about recruitment? We'd rather, we'd rather produce content that our target audience actually want to listen to and hear about.
Just carrying on one thread there about in-house, and we often think that they all have to be, and we know that there's the growth of journalists in-house and that sort of things, because journalists might not necessarily be the best writers, but they're certainly the best at getting the stories out of people. And I think, tapping into the skills of journalists is a good strategy. But, as the Edelman Trust Barometer tells us year upon year, that one of the most trusted sources of information for an organisation, for a business, the internal experts, subject matter experts. And yet I don't see enough of the internal experts, being put out there, out into the fore. And sure, they might not be gifted writers or anything like that, but that doesn't stop you from working with them to get their information, get the CEO's information and opinions and insights, and actually drive, content through your people. Just don't expect them to sit down and write a 2,000 word article, because it might not happen. But maybe it's podcasting, or maybe it's doing videos and doing it that way. So I think we need to be more flexible, and we're probably not seeing that enough. But I think that that's where there's some big opportunities for Aussie companies around content marketing.
But it's also being smarter with how we do it. So if the CEO is not a great writer, there's people like Peter that are. So you use Peter to interview him. It's half an hour of his time. We record it. We can then chop that up and use it and atomize it across different channels. Pete Ghost writes an article and you've got something brilliant. I mean,
Agree.
Yeah, to your point, it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all approach. It's how do we be flexible to deliver the best outcome.
Agreed. Yep. Andrés?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, to sum up, really, that it seems like when we're looking across the market and looking at some of the brands that we've talked about here, and Carolyn, Peter, Branka, that really it's about kind of leveling up, I guess. Really, there is a lot of content, programs and operations happening. You can see a lot of it in market. You can see a lot of the activity, and you can see a lot of the content. And really what we're now looking at is a degree of maturity, I guess, and sort of refining that, operationalizing it, making it more consistent, making it more aligned to the brand, to commercial and audience needs. And that's really important, because I think we're really at a point now where we've really got to put our money where our mouth is. We've really got to get serious about this if we're going to do it, because we know, to your point, Trevor, the Edelman Trust Barometer shows that internal expertise is a really big source of trusted content. And so there are so many reasons why, as organizations and marketers, it's really time for us to kind of step it up in this space this year.
Excellent. Well, we're just about out of time. People's stomachs are rumbling. So thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in and sticking around. Much appreciated. If you've got any, want to continue the conversation, I'm at Trevor Young on Twitter, and we've got Matt and Andreas also on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So connect with us, keep the conversation going. If you just want to finish off, Andreas, just where can people find any information about content leaders?
So head to contentleadersacademy.com. and you can see what the masterclass is comprised of. We've got 4 modules there that are focused on developing a holistic view of your content, getting some really solid strategy foundations, including research and audience insights, learning how to optimize your strategy in the best, operationalize your strategy in the best way possible, and then also optimizing it, leveraging some of the best tools and tactics and case studies from around the world. So we do have an early bird special that is due to finish in, I think, 2 or 3 days. It's 20% off the standard ticket price, and you can find all that information at contentleadersacademy.com, or you could hit up Trevor, Matt, or myself on LinkedIn or Twitter. So thank you again to everyone for joining us. Hopefully we get a chance to see you in person at the masterclasses, and we get a chance to chat more on social. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks.